Well, welcome back to another episode of the Water Matters podcast. I am pleased to once again be joined by Tim. Tim, how are you?
I'm very good, Matt. Nice to be back because we didn't see each other last month, did we?
No, we have had some time apart, but the podcast episodes have continued because you very kindly did an off-site podcast episode for us, which we'll talk about in a moment, actually, because I would love to remind anyone that's listening or watching of that particular episode. I think it's really important that we talk about that one in just a moment. But first of all, I have already seen you once this week, but you did not see me because I managed to watch a talk that you did on Tuesday morning as part of the Water Wise annual conference.
Yeah.
Tim, everyone, if you're a first-time watcher, first-time listener, Tim is the author of this book. If you're listening, then I am gesturing to a pile of books in front of me called The Last Drop, Solving the World's Water Crisis. And so Tim did a keynote speech on Tuesday morning this week as part of the WaterWise annual conference, which is this year called No Time to Waste. And I thought, I've heard many of the stories before, but I thought it was very, very good.
Are you saying I'm repetitive?
Not at all. I think we have to be. I think you need to. The book goes into a lot of detail, and surely, really, it is just reinforcing that message over and over and over again. I thought the one takeaway, which I know you had no control over whatsoever, but and it wasn't just you. It's whenever the other speakers have been contributing to this conference as well. But this reminder of the next slide, please, from COVID times, because Tim wasn't in control of moving on the PowerPoint presentation, and it's been the same for every speaker. It's amazing how immediately when you hear those words, we're taken back into like 2020, 2021, where this next slide, please, nonsense. I'm sure that drove you mad as well.
It did. They've been doing that for 5 years because they did a lockdown conference, an early lockdown in 2020.
Yeah.
And it was actually the first one I'd ever been to that was done like that.
Yeah.
But why they're still doing the next slide, please. Anyway, it was really good to be part of. Did you know I was going to be speaking? Or
no.
Were you just logging on?
I must admit, I only found out about it. No, I only found out about the conference. I'm sort of ashamed to say I only found out about it on Monday morning when it had already begun. Sarah Bunny, who we've met, she's been on was that a podcast she joined us on? No, it wasn't a podcast. It was a webinar thing that we did through Northampton University, wasn't it, I think? So Sarah, who joined us for that, I noticed that she'd shared it on LinkedIn because she's talking on Thursday morning. And so as soon as I saw that she'd mentioned it, I clicked through the link and quickly registered to attend. Not the Monday because it pretty much done and dusted already, but the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, and then yes, to my surprise, I saw that you were talking on Tuesday morning. So, it was very good.
It was good to be part of the WaterWise conference. Actually, when you said you saw me, I wasn't sure which talk you were going to say because
have you done several?
I've run of talks in the last month. So the week before, I was at Sainsbury's headquarters talking to them about water management, especially on the kind of the farming and food supply side.
Yeah.
And they were very receptive. The week before that, I was invited in by a Danish company called DHI to speak to their executive team about the book and put in what they do. They're a water engineering firm, putting what they do in kind of a global context. So been busy. People have been
very good.
Really interested in the book recently.
And have you done WaterWise stuff before?
Not the conference, but funny enough, one of the very first pieces of research I did for the book was that lockdown conference in the middle of COVID.
Okay.
So that was when I started research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was very good. And I was listening to more of it this morning because this morning they had a whole section on water reuse within housing developments. And so, a couple of interesting case studies. There's even more on rainwater harvesting tomorrow morning. And so it seems to be, it seems to be very interesting and something that we're not either in the form of Water Matters or Graph UK kind of heavily involved with at the moment, but we'll certainly look to be because clearly there's a lot going on in the direction of reducing the water consumption per household for sure, And well, as the conference is titled, No Time to Waste, there does seem to be finally a sense of urgency around change.
There does, for sure. And we're going to get onto some of the reasons why in this podcast. I don't want to kind of preempt this week's topic, but yeah, it gets a lot into what the water companies are doing or not doing. And one thing they're doing is raising water prices, raising our bills. So that will make a lot of people who were previously not that concerned about their water bill suddenly start to pay attention to water efficiency. So
no, you're right. There definitely was and is a sense of excitement from certainly the people that I've listened to talking as part of the conference that I think has changed from conferences and talks I've heard before, because there is movement in the right direction in terms of reducing usage per person. And of course, that will be driven, as you say, by the impact of what people pay for water, which we are going to come on to in this episode shortly. But it would be remiss of me not to ask you, because I haven't seen you since you were there in person at the release of these beavers in Northamptonshire. You very kindly attended that for us and interviewed some of the people at the Wildlife Trust for Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire and Northamptonshire. And so tell me a bit about it. How was your experience?
Yeah, it was an amazing day. It was kind of like 2 bucket list items in one, because I really wanted to see a beaver release. You know, the beavers used to be in this country as recently as 1789. So to see them come back now was a historic moment. I mean, there have been releases around the country in the last 5 years, but that's only really the last 5 years. There was some in Scotland before that, but it's only just started happening. So it was amazing to see. I also got to be a TV kind of news reporter for the day.
Yeah.
So Graf kindly kind of brought along a cameraman, and we interviewed a number of people. So if anyone hasn't seen the previous episode or heard the previous episode, do listen, but then also do watch it on YouTube, because I got to hold one of those furry mics and everything. It was great.
You did a very, very good job. It was very professional. Unfortunately, having not been able to attend, what that did mean, which I'm really pleased about, was that I also got to watch back and watch it as any of our viewers would, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was fascinated from the start to the end, because you can just the passion and excitement and real sense of like achievement and relief from the people that have worked on this project for more than 4 years. It really comes across in the interviews that you did, and that's just great to see anyway. But yeah, it was just really fascinating hearing the stories, hearing what has gone into it. And there is I'm aware that I'm seeing more of it right now because of that recent episode and the fact that we are now working closely with the Wildlife Trust, and we're getting sent these videos of beavers on a sort of weekly basis so that we can see what's going on, and then we can share it with the audience of both Water Matters and Graph UK. But the truth is I'm seeing it all over the place, because there is a lot of news about beavers right now, isn't there? Progress is being made on that front.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, around the same time as the release, it was about a month ago, there was some international news. Did you hear the Czech story?
No.
From the Czech Republic? So there was a planned dam that was going to be built by the local government in a part of Czech Republic. It's called Czechia now, actually, isn't it? But it was kind of caught up in red tape, and been going on for years. And apparently, just a group of beavers moved in and essentially built the dam for them. In a couple of weeks. No one noticed, but it saved them like over €1 million in having to build.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, no, I didn't
So it really shows how beavers are these water engineers that we've been saying, and can save people and water companies a lot of money. But the other exciting news from a UK perspective was that only a couple of weeks after we went to that release, and we were talking a lot in that podcast episode about, wouldn't it be great when or if beavers can be released in the wild, if they didn't have to be fenced in anymore? Because the Northamptonshire release, like all the previous ones, was in a penned-in area. It's not a large area, like a really nice large lake, but surrounded by a fence that they couldn't get out of. That was part of the stipulation of getting the license.
Yeah.
So a lot of the conversation was, well, if we really want to see those benefits, like in Czechia, if you really want to see those benefits, you need to let beavers roam free. Anyway, DEFRA did announce at the end of that month that they will start to allow wild release licenses, which is amazing. And there has been the very first one just 7 days ago at the date of this podcast. In Dorset was the very first fully wild beaver, not fenced in. So I'm super excited to see that start to change in the next few years, of seeing where beavers actually move to and seeing what they do in the wild on rivers. That'll be the big difference, because all releases to date have been in lakes. They like being in lakes, but they much prefer being in rivers. Their natural instinct is to dam, and that is also the best for us when they start damming things and we see water retention and flood protection. So it's really exciting times.
No, there is a lot going on, and it really does seem to have captured people's interest. I've been amazed by how many views sort of our video has had in terms of the Water Masters podcast that you did, but also some of the videos on Instagram that the Wildlife Trust themselves have shared. Typically their videos get several hundred, perhaps a few thousand views, but the one particularly at the very start when the beavers were released has had well over 1 million views, and it's just such is the power and the positivity around this story, and the fact that it is so significant because it's been such a long time, and hopefully it's great from their perspective because they wanted to generate awareness and interest in this anyway. And hopefully it's also had a knock-on impact that people are just more aware of what the Wildlife Trust do and all the benefits to the general kind of biodiversity and ecosystem, not just around what the beavers are going to be doing. But it's great to see, having kind of not known too much about it before we started talking to them about sponsoring the cameras there, so that people can get access to see the impact of this family of beavers. But the more I have learnt about it, the better it is to see that more eyes are now sort of focused on it, and also learning what the good stuff they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talk about nature-based solutions a lot, but the easiest way to kind of sum it up, or to give a face to nature-based solutions, is a furry beaver face. People instantly kind of understand what you're talking about. It's also lucky that they're furry and cute.
Yes.
If it was, say, cockroaches or rats that had these benefits, it would be a harder sell.
Very much. And I think even luckier still that I think it's the mother of the family that's gone there has only got 3 legs, right? So she's kind of limping around, kind of hopping around, which makes her look even more cute. And I think that the stars have aligned somehow. That's just people, will be following what she's doing, just because, that sense of kind of. These sort of cute furry animals, like you say, just seems to be capturing people's imagination and attention, which is great. And it will be interesting, very interesting, as I did touch on in the last episode. This is a start of at least a 2-year journey for us with the Wildlife Trust over at in Northamptonshire, because we are sponsoring the cameras for that long, very much on purpose, so that we can see what impact do they have, what do they do, because it's all kind of a maybe, or you don't know until they start to kind of settle there and do what they do. So it's going to be very interesting to see, and so it is a recurring theme that we'll keep coming back to on future episodes. We are looking forward to getting some, I think we got some, if we haven't already, then some drone footage of the kind of wetlands to see, the starting point, if you like, and then we'll revisit on a kind of quarterly basis at least to see how that changes as the beavers do get to work.
Yeah, brilliant. And props to the Wildlife Trust. Really, the work they do is amazing. I was so impressed with all the staff and volunteers, and a lot of the work they do is really on a shoestring. So if anyone wants to donate to the Wildlife Trust, please do. Donate to your local one. They do a lot of great work, especially with beavers.
Yeah, and it's also, certainly the wetlands over in Northamptonshire, near to the shopping centre, Rushton Lakes, all that sort of stuff. It's just a lovely place to go, isn't it? It really is. You could easily lose a few hours there, without having to go into the shops as well, which is even better. But it's a lovely bit of scenery around there and a nice walk and stuff. So
yeah, you can see 2 river islands in one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. Very true.
I'd be desperate to make a river island fun.
Yeah, I know which one I'm going to, that's for sure, and it's not indoors. So good. So yes, please, if you're listening, if you haven't watched the previous episode, please do. and then please share it. Please share it with friends, family. Let us know what you think about it. We really do appreciate your feedback. But for those perhaps less interested in nature-based solutions and things that they might think don't concern them, let's get onto a topic that does concern pretty much everyone, certainly in England and Wales, and that is the price we pay for water. So that is what this episode is going to be about, because things are changing, and of course it is a topic that you may have seen or read headlines about or articles about, because costs are certainly increasing, and households are about to feel I was going to say feel the pain. I'm not sure. It's I guess dependent on people's financial situation and all that sort of stuff as to how much pain will be felt. But changes are coming, and there are good parts of that, and perhaps, of course, there are bad parts of that. So you have very recently provided us with an article on this topic, The True Cost of Water, which has been uploaded to the watermatters.life website. So listeners or viewers can go to our website, watermatters.life, and read Tim's full article on this topic. But let's go into some detail about what is happening with the true cost of water.
Yeah, and there's a lot to go into here. So essentially, the news is that from April the 1st, so we're speaking in the middle of March at the moment, from April the 1st, all water bills in England and Wales will be going up. There's some differences in that depending on which water company. All of them are going up, but there's some going up by slightly more. It's an average of 33% increase. The biggest hike will happen in April. They'll then be kind of slower after that, but £86 on average will be added to your water bill annually. In terms of slight differences, so Wessex and Northumberland will rise by the smallest amount, 21%, Thames Water 34%, the Welsh company is going up by 42%. People will certainly feel that. Now there's been a feeling for a long time, and it probably came up a lot in the Waterwise conference, that water bills have been unnaturally low for political reasons. So politicians don't want to add money to bills, fair enough, but there's a regulator, Ofwat, who kind of signs off water bills. And speak to anyone in a water company and they'll say, well, we wanted to put money into infrastructure for years, but we had to keep our bills low. There's some truth to that, but there's also some slight kind of evasions of truth to that. So let's get into that. So with the announcement of the bills going up, the Ofwat Chief Executive David Black said that this will allow £104 billion to be spent on upgrading our water systems. And he got quite specific. So cleaner rivers, long-term water supply, 1,700 wastewater treatment works to be upgraded, 15,000 kilometres of rivers to be improved. There's talk of 9 new reservoirs, 9 new water transfer systems. So great, we need all that. It's about time. But this direct link between saying that couldn't have happened without the bills going up is, as I say, a bit of how to put this tactfully. There's another side to that story. Let's put it that way. So I will now mention that other side, because basically we are one of the very few countries in the world that has a privatised water system. We privatised our previously national water companies in 1989. The reason for doing that was to bring in more infrastructure investment. So it's fully ironic that we should be talking now about a dire need for infrastructure investment when the whole point of privatising was to bring in infrastructure investment. That never happened. So according to We Own It, which is a campaign group that calls for renationalisation of all utilities, in fairness, not just water sector, but their figures are that only 65% of the price rise happening in April will be used for investment. The water companies will take more than a third of that money to pay interest on debt and dividends to shareholders. This is a known figure. Since privatisation in 1989, companies have paid £78 billion in shareholder dividends while cutting investment spending. Investment spending has been down 15% year on year since privatisation. And on top of that, they have added debts from zero. So when they became privatised, they were given a debt-free company to run. That's gone from 0 to 60 billion. Much of that to overseas investors, much of that to dividend and shareholders. And most of our water companies now in England are owned by, fairly complex international conglomerates. So this idea that they never weren't allowed to invest in infrastructure because water bills were too low isn't true if 78 billion have gone to shareholders and infrastructure investment's gone down and debt has gone up from 0 to 60 billion pounds. So there is truth and half-truths and untruths in the suggestion that they had to go up.
It's pretty scary when you hear it all sort of rounded up like that. It's shocking, really, isn't it? And of course, very difficult to do much about it now.
Well, not necessarily. So they could be renationalised.
True.
So there's a clause called special administration that allows the government to renationalise a water company. Thames Water are flirting very close to that. There have been many calls. Lib Dems are called for use of special administration. So no, there are things that can be done.
No, indeed. And I suppose the sure, if we're not already at that point, I guess if that point is that they don't do those two basic things that they must do, supply water and deal with your wastewater, then I suppose we're not there yet. But it does feel like it's already disastrous enough that perhaps
this is why it's a really interesting time, because the Labour government probably could have had the public will, or did have the public goodwill, to renationalise or to take one particularly failing company and prove the potential for special administration. But instead we're getting they've said, no, let's give the current system a better shot, let's let them raise water bills. So this increase by 33% is far less than the water companies wanted, by the way. They wanted a far higher increase in water bills. But anyway, we are getting this 33% over 5 years increase, a bigger increase in the first year than any of the following 5 years. So, it's kind of... It'll be interesting to see how this goes, but it is very much allowing, if you kind of took this mindset, kind of allowing the private water companies to have got away with it. But it's giving them the money and saying, okay, right, you get yourselves out of it now. You've got the money. You've no longer got that excuse, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm certain that many people, homeowners or people paying water bills, are very aware of it. I know from our own team here, one of our colleagues just shared this information voluntarily a few weeks ago. We just within our whole team Microsoft Teams chat, he literally just received notification that morning that his water bill was increasing from £387 up to £537, so 150 quid, pretty much 40%. And he made the point, and there is absolutely nothing he can do about it. He can't shop around. He can't, do what you would do with energy suppliers. Go and get some comparative prices from other places. You've just got to take it on the chin and pay the extra.
Yeah, these are private monopolies. We don't have any option in England and Wales as to which water company we use. We can only use the one that's in our region. And the water system is a stitch up, I would go as far to say. Probably my favourite example of this, and I could go on for an hour with shocking water company facts. So the Australian infrastructure firm Macquarie owned Thames Water between 2007 and 2017. I talk about them a bit in the book. They left Thames Water with £2 billion of debt, £2 billion of debt, while paying its investors, according to the FT, I think it was, between 15% and 19% in dividends each year. That's a very healthy return on investment. Healthy to the point of some in the UK media accused it of asset stripping. Now, we at Water Matters, of course, wouldn't use such words. We're merely quoting. But you'd think that'd be a lesson learned. But then in August 2021, Ofwat approved a new 1 billion equity takeover of Southern Water, deeming the new owner to be fit for purpose. The new owner was Macquarie. They were back. So it's kind of insane the way that regulation has failed. Privatisation might have worked with strict regulation. The regulation has been weak at best. Now the average CEO of a water company earns £1.7 million. I think the highest earner was about £3 million a year salary. That was at United Utilities. United Utilities, by the way, are the water company in charge of the water around Lake Windermere, which is probably, the jewel in our natural national crown, which is now blighted by toxic algal blooms every summer because of sewage inflow from United Utilities. So we've been rewarding failure and essentially allowing international investors to strip those assets and not invest in infrastructure. So it's a shocking situation we find ourselves in. So
no, it is.
And they're getting a bailout essentially for April's bill rise.
Yes, exactly. And I think people probably realise this already, especially people that would be listening to this podcast interested in water and sustainable water management, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure we're probably telling you things that you already know, but it is helpful just to kind of hear it in such a succinct and direct way to realise how much of a contributing factor that all has been to get us to the point that we're at now. And then also why, therefore, something must change because of it. Unfortunately, probably not the change that is deserved or the change that a lot of people would want, you would imagine, because it is utterly ridiculous that you can do that and then still just kind of expect someone else to literally pay for it by paying more for their water.
Yeah, the only kind of positive I would say about the water companies is that all the people I've met that work for water companies are really good people, really knowledgeable, really skilled engineers, working really hard. It's the top level that's let them down as much as let us down. There's a great quote I've got to read out from Fergal Sharkey. If people don't know Fergal Sharkey, he is he's a river campaigner and water campaigner, and kind of blew the whistle on the sewage crisis actually. But he's also the lead singer of the Undertones. So he's a punk rocker who has taken his kind of punk attitude towards how to deal with the water system. Anyway, he told The Guardian about when they asked him about the price rises in April, because he's kind of the go-to spokesperson if you want a good quote on water, essentially. And he's very knowledgeable. And he said, I quote, £100 million they've paid out to fat cat bosses in salaries and benefits in the last 10 years. In an ideal world, in the boards of Ofwat and the Environment Agency, if they understood anything about honour, chivalry or principle, they would have resigned, and certainly should do today en masse. So if it sounds like I've been harsh, there's plenty of people saying much harsher things. And again, he pointed out about the sewage scandal that between 2020 and 2023, wastewater companies dumped sewage into our rivers, which they never were allowed to, but were effectively allowed to be getting away with that for a total of 12 million hours. So not a single one of our rivers or waterways now meet good environmental standards purely because of the sewage scandal and what our water and wastewater companies have been allowed to get away with.
Yeah, which is just I don't know much that we can say about it, really. It's just shocking, isn't it? It's absolutely crazy, and I hope if you're driving your car at the moment, if you're listening to this, don't get angry at the wheel. It is what it is. We're only pointing out the facts, but and it is quite horrific that all the things that you've just said and how we have got to this point. And yes, I think you also share a few other things that Fergal Sharkey said in the article that you've shared on Water Matters, which I certainly enjoyed his direct points about it as well.
There might be another Fergal quote coming up.
Yeah.
But you make a very good point. Yeah, so that's the situation we're in. So we may wish the past different, but this is where we're at. So how do we deal with it? And I mean, there is another way in the UK. The Scottish Water and Northern Irish Water are both public owned. So it's not like we have to have this privatised system. And in the UK, as I say, the other nations do not. Welsh Water is a not-for-profit. That's another potential model, albeit they've been part of the sewage scandal too, so it doesn't necessarily solve everything. But the flip side of the coin, and what we can perhaps spend the second half of the podcast talking about, is that yes, water bills were too cheap.
Absolutely.
And yes, if we want people to value water, and people being us, householders, as well as businesses, as well as, to a certain extent, water companies, probably that price needs to be raised. And I think going back to episode 1 of this podcast, we had this figure that the National Audit Office forecast that total water demand will outstrip supply by 2034. That's under a decade away now. If anything, actually, that might be getting closer. I mean, I think that National Audit Office forecast was done back in 2019. The average UK householder uses 150 litres of mains water per day compared to the EU average of 120. Part of that is because our water bill is our lowest utility bill, I would argue. I mean, that was the case for me. Before I started writing this book, I was a high water user. I didn't realise it. I just pay a monthly fixed fee a monthly fixed fee to Thames Water every month that was kind of fairly low, compared to my other bills. So I don't really think about it. I didn't even know I had a water meter. Because I just paid this fixed amount, this fixed direct debit. Yeah. So I didn't know it was linked to how much water I used. And I think, perhaps plenty of other people are in the same boat.
Oh, I'm absolutely certain. I mean, many people that I've spoken to describe it in exactly the same way. It is, compared with what you pay for your electricity, what you pay for broadband, all the other utility bills, that especially during, was it 2022, where prices hiked and all that sort of stuff? We saw big price rises with electricity in particular. People were so much more conscious about turning lights off, turning switches off, not excessively boiling the kettle, all the sort of behavioural change things that can be done and are still done now, I think, because partly because it was also very common for you to get those readers that showed you from the electricity companies how much power you were using in a real-time basis, wasn't it? So you could actually really and of course it was also during a time where a lot of people did just start staying at home for a lot longer, either because of working from home or just the hangover from all the pandemic lockdowns and all that sort of stuff. So people were at home, much more conscious about how much they were using power, and then installed these devices that showed them, when they were kind of peaks and troughs of their usage and all that sort of stuff. And I think a lot of people started to change their behavior and save money. And it was all about saving money. It wasn't about saving the planet. It wasn't about saving anything other than just to reduce their bill, I think. Yeah. And without a similar thing with water, people, I don't think, do feel the same about water.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a capitalist economy, but price signals matter. Price signals are what drive many of our decisions, certainly in households, certainly in household budgets. I mean, you mentioned 2022, so I researched this for the blog I wrote, and the average water bill for a UK household stands at approximately £473 a year. Broadband is more than that, £480. But the average energy bill is still around £1,800. And in 2022, it went as high as £2,400.
You're right.
So, yeah, I mean, we need electricity. We need gas currently. So you kind of have to pay that, right? But you have means and ways of reducing it by becoming more efficient. With water, around the £400 mark, there's not that signal there.
No.
And also we'll get onto meters in a moment, but there's often also not that level of information there. It's quite hard to know your real-time water use.
Yes, well, and so many households are just paying that fixed fee, aren't they? In terms of not dependent on how much they're actually using, because they don't have a water meter installed.
Yeah. So smart water meters do exist, like the equivalent of the energy ones, where you can look and see, exactly how much water you're using in real time.
Yep.
Thames Water rolled that out for a lot of London customers, but it seems to have kind of stalled. The rollout hasn't really continued at pace.
Right.
Then you've got the kind of fairly dumb meters, but they're still meters, which I have in my house, and a lot of people do. Mine's under the pavement. I don't quite know how standard that is, but I can go outside, look up in the pavement. And obviously, it's on my bill as well, so it'll show me exactly how many cubic meters of water I've used in the last quarter. So I get vague signals of up or down by quarterly amounts, but I can work out from that, you can work out with some maths what your daily usage is, or what your figure per person in the household is.
Yes.
But there's a lag effect to the point that you could have had a leak for the last quarter.
Yes, yes, quite
very
Absolutely.
Easily.
You wouldn't
in
even
fact,
know about it.
part of our high water use turned out to be a leaky loo. So a loo that after you flush constantly keeps putting a bit of water in, but you can't tell because the water level in a loo doesn't rise as the design of a loo is.
Absolutely.
A smart water meter will tell you instantly. So you get kind of a red peak on your meter, and you realise, oh wow, I've got a leak. So apparently, I forget the exact figure, but when Thames Water started putting in smart meters, there was a reduction in water use almost instantly. I think it was something like 7% of just instant reduction because people realised,
because
I've got a dripping tap.
Yeah.
Or, I must have a leaky loo.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference. But there is still a surprisingly large percentage of unmetered properties in this country where people don't have a water meter at all. You just pay a fixed amount each month. And almost always that's higher than what they would be paying with a water meter. So if that's you, anyone listening to the podcast, you can ask your water company to install a meter. They have to do that for you. And almost always, unless you're a high water user, unless you're regularly topping up your swimming pool, your water bills will be cheaper.
Yeah, because there might be some people that would be slightly concerned that it could go the other way.
Yes, and I think that's why people don't do it. They are concerned it'll go the other way. But if you're in any way frugal, I mean, I'm not even talking kind of going to any extreme measures. But if you care about your water use, your water bill will be lower if you have a meter. I probably should caveat that with something so that someone doesn't see me.
This is not official financial advice.
Yeah, this is not official financial advice. Please speak to a financial advisor.
Yes, but that's certainly based on your own experience. That was the case.
Yeah, based on my own experience, based on various surveys and research. And in fact, with the price bills happening in April, so a number of water companies have priced that differently according to whether their customers are metered or not. In the affinity water area, non-metered customers will see their prices go up by 29% compared to 19% for metered customers. So they're kind of hitting the non-metered customers over the head a little bit because they can.
Yes.
But also, non-metered customers could, if they wanted, just be having a constant house.
Of course they could. Yeah, because they've got a fixed charge.
And be paying the same. Yeah. So it's in everyone's interest, really, to get the whole population onto meters.
Yeah.
And then hopefully smart meters.
And it fits very much with what we said. I remember it reasonably well, which is quite surprising because my memory is awful. But from the very first episode of this Water Matters podcast, we talked a lot about just raising the conversation around water to the surface, just bringing it to the surface, just encouraging more and more people to be aware of it, to talk about it, to think about it. And it does exactly that. If you've got, you could either ignore it and just keep paying your water bill, especially if you don't have a water meter, and you will get the higher increase in that situation there. Or you could just become a little bit aware of it and do something about it and think about it. And does it need us to get to that point of families or sort of, I immediately think of parents around the country telling their children what to do and not to do in terms of water, like we all used to have about turning the lights off if you leave a room and, closing a door to keep the heat in and all that sort of stuff. Do we need to get to that same point in relation to all these rules and do this and do that about, how we behave around water for it to change and get to where we want to be?
100%, which is an overused phrase, but in this case, that is 100% what we need to get to, because it's the only way that you get to change. It's also the only way that you share knowledge.
Yes.
So when the energy bills spiked, so I guess it's pretty directly linked to the invasion of Ukraine. I think it was a conversation down the pub, right? Oh, what are you doing to decrease? Or I've got this new thing that uses less energy. Or you talk about it. Yeah. I mean, we grew up in an era, I'm guessing, where probably our dad said, "You got to turn that light off. Can't leave a room without turning a light off."
Exactly.
And that was ingrained into us.
Exactly.
The same with water, for sure. Yeah. I mean, really long showers. You start becoming very aware of how long your kids' showers are.
Yeah.
Or your own.
Yeah.
Do you need to use a hose to water your plants? No. A rainwater butt does that job. I mean, I haven't used a garden hose for about 5 years. I like gardening. It's not like my garden is completely neglected.
No.
I can do all of that with rainwater. So actually, I went from a high water user where there's about 160 litres per person in our household. As I say, the UK average is about 150, but that's high. So I was quite shocked that we were that high. All we did in our house was we got a new dishwasher, but that was only because the old one packed in. Yeah. Most dishwashers have an eco setting. Ours is around 6.5 litres per cycle. That would be like running a tap for half a minute. So if you wash your water under a running tap, you're using way more water than a dishwasher. Yeah. Again, not everyone realises that. I think people think, a dishwasher must be really wasteful. It's actually not.
No.
You can get little aerators fitted to your taps, which just add air bubbles to reduce the water coming out of your tap. You kind of don't notice because it feels like it's coming out at the same pressure.
Yeah.
You can do the same for your shower. As I say, added a couple of water butts. That brought us down to 80 litres per person, so halved our water use. And that's not that radical, really. So I think as soon as you start thinking about it, I only started thinking about it because I was writing a book about water.
Yes, absolutely.
It still wasn't the price signal that mattered to me at that point.
No.
It was, I'm researching this, I wonder what I could do. But I didn't install any real fancy technology at all.
No, and it makes me think of something I heard them say this morning on one of these particular talks about what they're doing in new developments in terms of trying to reduce that 150 litres per person down to, below 100 really is their aim. But there was this whole conversation around you can do a lot in terms of changing the way buildings are designed, and also the products included, like the aerators and different shower heads and water saving devices and things like that. But actually, you do also need to make sure that the people then moving into the property understand what's different and why it's different, so that they don't just either rip it out immediately because they don't like the low flow, the pressure that they're getting out of their taps or whatever, or that they don't just run the water for 3 times as long to kind of overcompensate for the fact that there is less water coming out. And there are a few other examples, but it does ultimately come down to, again, another thing that we've talked about on this on previous episodes of this podcast is it has to come down to the collective power of the people, really, in terms of if we really want to have a positive impact. It is what's happening in everyone's homes or at everyone's offices or in buildings around and within the country that people have to be focused on it in order to have the biggest impact and actually save what's currently being wasted.
Yeah, true. And there's definitely a real fear that people would rip out their low flow kind of attachments to their taps and.
I think so, absolutely, and I think you can build every new home from now on with a shower that's going to cut the water use in half or whatever. But But if that can just be literally ripped out and replaced with one that's just going to give you the pressure and the volume of water that you're used to, then some people are going to do that.
So I think you need two things. One is fit and forget technology. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a rainwater tank that is plumbed into your downstairs loo, and it flushes your downstairs loo for you, that's connected to the mains water, so that if there's no rain for 2-3 weeks, it'll automatically top up with mains water anyway. You're not going to rip that out.
Of course you're not. No, and you're not even going to know.
Yeah, you're probably
in most cases.
Yeah, you're probably not. And I'd actually say aerators on taps, most people aren't going to rip out because they tend to be just as good, if not better, actually, because you get the ones with like the spray that turn into a spray attachment. I've got that in my kitchen. You might rip it out with the shower. Mm-hmm. In fact, my family have petitioned many times to rip it out of the shower. But half of our water use was the shower.
Yes.
People don't realise how much water comes out of a shower. Also, I think maybe we all still believe this idea that showers are way more efficient than baths.
Yes.
They're not really. Mm-hmm. That may be true if you have a short shower.
Yeah.
But yes, so there's that fit and forget technology, making it as good as it was previously. You don't notice that it's any different.
Yes.
But the other one is price. It is price signal.
Absolutely.
So we do need to care about the amount of water we use, and really that does come down to water bills and there's a signal from price, but also we need more transparency from our metering and from our water companies to maybe give us more regular updates. I mean, I haven't logged on to my Thames Water account for a while, but the last time I did, all you really get is a PDF of your previous quarterly bill. Yeah. I mean, they could put so much more information about my regular water use.
Yes.
I mean, I don't have a smart meter, so I'm not expecting kind of minute by minute, but more than quarterly. Come on.
Absolutely. Something that you could actually use to then at least think about behavioural change or all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps once people are paying these higher prices for water, then maybe there will be an increased demand for that kind of information, and they'll actually have to provide that sort of stuff, because I do think that it's going to be quite interesting to see what some people do in relation to, once they start to notice that actually they are paying X amount more and they start to have a reason to really reduce their usage. I think they could be quite innovative with how they do that. I think that once they've got a reason to do it, I think it could be quite fascinating, and I hope that it gets documented, and perhaps we could aim to do a good job with that as well. But news stories about how people are actually reducing their water bills and what are they choosing to do differently, I think could be very interesting, because I think once that focus is there and that desire is there to do something about it, people can come up with some really, really good ideas. And I think that they haven't needed to date, because I don't think anyone's really felt the pain of it. And perhaps that is one of the good things that will come as a result of this. We could see what the general public of the UK might start to sort of come up with in terms of ways that they can actually reduce how much they're using and therefore reduce how much they're paying.
Yeah, I think so. And I often end up saying there's just so much low-hanging fruit with water efficiency. Most of us are really wasteful, quite possibly without even knowing it. I mean, I think when people are surveyed, and Waterwise have done some good surveys on this, when people are asked, how much water do you think you use per day in your house? I think that people go around, 25 litres is typically what people guess. If you put the washing machine on, you're using 50 litres minimum. That's if you've got a good washing machine. So people don't realise how much water they use.
No, and I would take it one step further, that not necessarily the people listening to this, because I think, again, they're probably more interested in it than just the general member of the public. But a lot of people couldn't even show you or tell you what 50 litres is. And I think that one thing I want us to do as a way of really just making it blindingly obvious, most people can picture a 2-litre bottle of Coke or lemonade or whatever, a fizzy drink that we're all from our, childhood, we're used to those kind of 2-litre bottles. That's a pretty big bottle. All right, but it's 2 litres. It's only 2 litres. So when you then talk about 50 litres, you start to suddenly be able to picture it and think, actually, that is a lot of water.
Yeah. And this is another thing about the cost of water, in that so water companies will charge you according to cubic metre worth of water use.
Yes.
Cubic metre is 1,000 litres, as you well know. A cubic metre of water from Thames Water costs me less than buying a litre bottle of water from WH Smith. So that is a way of thinking about how cheap our water supply is.
That's insane.
Yes. Yeah. And it should be just as good a quality drinking water as well.
Yeah. It's reminded me as well, you shared a slide on your talk the other morning of the cubic
cubic kilometre of water.
Yes.
Yeah.
In relation to, what was that in relation? Because that was in relation to, was incredible, seeing that, and perhaps we could get a copy of that to put it in the visual version of this podcast, because that was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at the global scale of the water crisis, you start looking at aquifers that are depleting at rates of cubic kilometres per year.
Yeah.
And evaporation loss. That particular one was to do with evaporation loss from Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the 2 biggest reservoirs in the US.
Yeah.
And they both lose around a cubic kilometre of water a year to evaporation, because they built their largest reservoirs essentially in the desert,
very
in the Nevada desert.
Yes.
But a cubic kilometre looks exactly how you'd imagine. The tallest building in the world in Dubai isn't a kilometre. So stick a cubic kilometre on the surface, and it would tower above all the skyscrapers in Manhattan, which I think is what I did the slide on.
Yeah, and it's this visual. You suddenly realise that's how much water that is. It's enormous, and it's exactly the same when we talk about anything from how much a washing machine uses to how much a shower uses. I think we have to. It needs to be that people understand, how much we're talking about. And I always like the sort of 2 litre bottle reference, just because most people they do know what that is.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be very, very interesting once people have a reason to actually turn the tap off, or actually reuse some water that they've already poured for something else. I really do believe that people will come up with quite innovative ways to reduce how much they use.
Yeah, I agree. But there is a third way, which we could get onto, which is, I do think it is unfair that these price increases are happening across the board.
Yep.
Everyone. It's not means tested in any way. That will hit people in poverty, low earners, really hard.
Of course.
Going up by £100, £200 is a lot of money.
Yep.
There is a way that you can design bills that do that a lot more fairly, and it's known as rising block tariffs. So a really simple way of understanding a rising block tariff is your first cubic metre of water is free. Everyone gets it for free. Your second could be quite cheap. Your third, a bit more expensive. Your fourth, more expensive, and so on. It keeps rising per block of water. Other water-stressed countries do this. So Israel have done this for a long time. Singapore have done this since the 1970s. It gives a really clear signal, but it also allows vulnerable users to quite often get cheaper water bills. So if you are a vulnerable user and an efficient water user, your water bill will be cheaper under a rising block tariff.
Yeah.
If you're a high-end user, and if you're filling your swimming pool, your bill will be very much higher. But typically, if you've got a swimming pool, you can probably afford a higher water bill than currently. So certainly, we're talking about price signals and price increases. If you're a high net worth individual, you're not going to notice this April's water bill increase at all. It's meaningless.
No, and therefore you're not going to change.
Therefore, you're not going to change. And in fact, it's really interesting about the average figure. And I think I learned this from that very first Waterwise conference back in 2020. So we have this average figure of about 150 litres per person per day in the UK water use. But that is skewed by this long tail of high-end water users. There's a big difference between the mean and the mode if you took the average here. So most of us are actually around kind of 80 to 100 litres anyway. But if you put all the population together, you've got a lot of high-end water users who are using, 300, 400, 500 litres per person per day, multiple en suites in large houses. So the average figure is slightly skewed by that. So those people with very large houses, several properties, swimming pools like our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, to charge them via a rising block tariff. So they can keep using that much water.
But they pay.
They will pay for it. They may well be able to afford it and be absolutely fine with it. But then that money then goes into paying for infrastructure.
Yes.
That money should go back into the system.
Yeah.
And improve things for everyone, including the vulnerable users.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of rising block tariffs. So actually really interestingly, so researching that again for this blog and podcast, I found out that a number of UK water companies are trialling rising block tariffs for the first time. So since last year, since 2024, there have been a few pilot trials going on, and this was never done before. Partly, the word in the industry was that Ofwat didn't allow it, so it wasn't an allowed system within the UK water industry. But since the point that I think we have elaborated very well on that we have reached, Ofwat have said, okay, you can be more innovative, try some things.
Yeah.
And one of the things since last year have been some rising block tariff trials, and early signs are good. So Affinity Water have trialled one. They believe that 2 out of 3 homes in their trial will pay less for their water through a rising block tariff. So again, it's fairer for the average and economical user. And so I'm really kind of hoping to see I'm hoping to see that starts to get rolled out. I'll be watching with a lot of interest. It'd be great to kind of come back to this at some point on water matters.
Absolutely.
The barrier will be meters. So you need to be metered for this to work.
Yeah.
As we said earlier, there's a lot of properties that still don't have meters.
Yes.
And obviously it would be ideally smart meters. So for rising block tariffs to work, you need to be smart metered, and there are sticking points over multiple residency properties and so on. But as I say, other countries have done it.
Yes, because of course people are only the water companies are only going to know by usage, aren't they? It's not like they're going to go around door to door and ask if you've got a swimming pool or a hot tub or multiple en-suites and all that sort of stuff. So it is going to be purely the meter you'll use that amount, which they will determine is, okay, that's the amount that everyone kind of needs to use, and then you'll go above, and as that rises, they'll know that you're just using more than necessary, I suppose, and therefore for the extra bit, you're going to be paying a higher price for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a far fairer system.
Yeah.
I'm really hopeful to see some of that happening a bit more.
I'm sure I do remember, I can't remember which country it was, but I'm sure I remember one of the stories in your book where there was that specific example of someone with a swimming pool was paying more for the water because of their higher usage than sort of just the average household in that particular country. I can't think where it was, but I'm pretty sure it was a country where they were bringing water in. I think they didn't even have it, so it was an extreme example, but again, something that just makes sense. And if it's happening there, why can't it happen here? Because surely, well, it does. Just the way you describe it, it does just seem to be very, very obvious that that if some people do want to use so much more of it, then why shouldn't they pay more? And I can't see. Well, I'd be surprised if people in that situation would push back too much against that either. It feels really quite logical and sensible, and I mean, people can argue against everything, I suppose, but it does seem to be one of those things that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so. So rising block tariffs. You heard it here first, potentially.
Hopefully so. And we will come back in a few episodes' time, or well, who knows, to see what's happened. Especially if these trials are happening now. That's good news.
Yeah, and actually, just looking at the detail on the Affinity Water scheme, they've called it Water Save, and it ran from 1st of October 2023 to September. So it's running to September this year, 2025.
Right.
And they've done it as the first 30,000 litres of water used each year will be free. Then the next 215,000 litres will be costed at £1.51 per 1,000 litres used. Okay, it immediately gets quite complicated. But essentially, same idea. But 30,000 litres of water free, I think we could all kind of imagine that. I mean, that's quite a lot of water. It's way below the average usage. But if you're super economical, your water bill would likely go down. And as I say, they've found that 2 out of 3 properties currently have seen their water bill going down.
Yeah.
And they're only halfway through that trial.
Yeah. Very interesting. And I think a lot of these points, whether it be just the impact that these higher prices have, I think, I think this relates to what we said right at the beginning around the energy and positivity in this Waterwise conference that you have been part of this week, and I've watched a little bit of. It's there. There is a lot of focus on this right now, and what happens over the next few months and certainly years, especially as we get closer to that 2034 point that you described earlier, it is going to be fascinating, and there is probably going to be a lot of change coming. Don't you think? Yeah, for sure. It is going to be fascinating. There is a lot of positivity. Some of that positivity will be from water companies thankful that they haven't been renationalised and have been given this kind of second lifeline. In fairness to the Environmental Secretary, Steve Reed, he said the government would ring-fence the money earmarked for investment. So these price increases, he's saying, will be ring-fenced for investment and can't be used for water bosses, bonuses or dividends. So let's hold them to that. Let's watch that closely. I don't quite see how that's possible in the current financial makeup of water companies, but anyway, that's the idea. So there's kind of two things happening in parallel. One is, yes, there's been major underinvestment. More money is needed for our water system, and that's partly why our bills need to go up. Yes. That is true. Yes. Whether that money should be handed to the same water companies and water company bosses that caused the problem in the first place, it depends on your politics. It does stick in the craw a little bit, but that's what's happening. And yeah, change is certainly happening in the water system. Yes, and I think it's very. We have touched on it before, and I've certainly within our business we've thought about it often in relation to the rainwater harvesting systems that we provide, particularly for domestic applications. We have said for a long time, because really there is not a huge financial incentive to install a rainwater harvesting system to your house, because unlike solar panels or whatever, that there is a financial benefit after a reasonably short space of time. With rainwater harvesting systems, really at the moment there still isn't. And of course that is hugely affected by how much we pay for water. If we suddenly paid 10 times what we're currently paying, then the payback period for that investment in a rainwater harvesting system would come down. So price changes and price rises I've always felt were inevitable. I think the frustrating thing is, see it from the positive. I think the positive thing is that actually it's not completely necessary for people to still make these positive changes. Well, I was talking to a potential customer about a project up in Scotland earlier on this week where they want to install rainwater harvesting systems on this development of about 140 houses and a wedding and conference kind of venue. But in Scotland they don't pay for household water anyway, so that is not being driven by a reduction in the bills for the people that are going to live in those homes, because at the moment they don't get a water bill, and so it's being driven because the developer wants this to be a development of sustainable, eco-friendly houses that do the right thing. So it's not completely necessary that everything has to be linked to what we pay. It can just be done because of doing the right thing and kind of trying to create a more sustainbut planet. Yeah, but that will only ever be niche, right? Yes, there'll only ever be a small percentage of the market that wants to do that. Yes, but I agree that price increases were inevitable. But I also think that rainwater harvesting on a mainstream kind of widespread basis is inevitable. One, because the prices will keep going up. Yes, but also two, as we've said all along, the climate change pressures are also coming. So we are also seeing changes in rainfall and droughts. Very true. And so it also will be necessary to hold on to rainfall more than we currently do. So yeah, there's two very strong reasons for rainwater harvesting, but we're only just starting to see the price one really come online. And as I say, that 33% is over 5 years. So some people may notice it immediately in April. Some people may only notice it, a quarter or two down the line, when they go, oh wow, that's quite a lot more than it was last year. Yeah. But over those 5 years, I think everyone will notice. Yeah, and I think I think that's sort of a good place to just remind people that we would love for this to be a two-way conversation, well, a three-way conversation, because, in addition to the conversations that we're having around these topics about water management in general, it would be even more interesting if you do kind of get in touch and share with us over the next few months as you do notice your water bills increasing, or perhaps you do make that change to get a water meter fitted, and then you start to look at your usage a lot more. I've certainly got a few people within our business and connected to our business that are doing that exact thing right now, so waiting for some kind of updates and feedback from them, and they're only doing it because they noticed how much they were paying. All of a sudden people have started to, or I've heard people saying their water bill has just come onto their radar. They suddenly know what they're paying, and they don't. Yeah, it's kind of, they don't like it really. It's suddenly a more significant figure, and so they're doing something about it, which is what this is all about. But it would be really interesting, as much as we're always keen for feedback on the topics and subject of the podcast anyway, and all of the articles on Water Matters, do get in touch. info@watermatters.life is the best email address just to send in anything that you think is relevant and interesting to other listeners as well. So anything you notice in terms of the price you're paying, and things that you're doing to change, to reduce usage and all that sort of stuff, we're really open to that, and would welcome any kind of information on that, because, as we've said, I think there's a lot of stuff happening over these next few months and the sort of year or so ahead, and a lot of it is going to relate to individual homes and businesses, and what the individuals are doing within those homes to see sort of how much change is coming.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, let's start that conversation.
Definitely.
What is happening to your water bill, and what are you doing about it? What water efficiency measures have you implemented and seen make that change? Yeah,
exactly. Good. Okay. Anything that we have not mentioned at all that we need to touch on before we finish, or is that it for this episode of the Water Matters podcast?
I think that's it, because we've ended with a nice ...
Yeah.
Let's let the listeners kind of fill in the blanks and tell us what's happening there end too.
No, I hope so, and I do think. Well, the good thing is we've got some sort of stories that, or real life evidence that a few people that I know are going to share with us, and so we will bring that to listeners as well, because it's always much more interesting when it's specific data and real life information that people are sharing. So yes, please do that. Please also, if you have enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share it with everyone you know. As we mentioned a couple of times, and we've definitely mentioned on previous episodes, we really are aiming to bring this conversation around water just to more and more homes, businesses, pubs, wherever you are, talk about water, talk about it's an important subject, and one that we will hear more about, and I'm sure you will hear more about, but the more you can engage with it and join us in this conversation, the better. Thank you very much, Tim, for joining me again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Please visit watermatters.life to check out the more recent articles that have been shared on there. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do, because then you'll get our fortnightly email on Water Wednesdays. And you'll read all things Water Matters. But for now, thank you very much for listening. We will look forward to joining you on the next episode of the Water Matters podcast.